Order. Questions to the Secretary of State for Scotland. John McNally.
Thank you. Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as there won't be another opportunity for Scottish questions before September, I wanted to draw the House's attention to an issue that was raised at an earlier Scottish questions, and I'm sure that you will join me in looking forward to the Moray Trophy ATP Challenger Tournament, which will take place in Glasgow in September from the 16th to the 22nd. We all welcome this positive addition to the tennis calendar, and I in particular look forward to welcoming you to the tournament. With permission, I will answer questions 1 and 10 together. After 20 years, I believe the current devolution settlement is the right balance, with appropriate decisions being taken for Scotland at Holyrood and for the whole of the United Kingdom in this Parliament. Since the first Scotland Act, Holyrood has become one of the most powerful devolved parliaments in the world.
John McNally.
Thank the Secretary of State for that response. On the devolution of powers, my question to the Secretary of State is on Falkirk Council's growth deal bid to both the Scottish and the UK Government. And to give the Secretary of State credit, he has been taking a keen interest in this proposed deal. As the Secretary of State well knows, this is an ambitious bid to bring horizontal community and business integration together. Therefore, can the Secretary of State give the member for Linlithgow and Falkirk East and I an update on the timeline of the investment zone, the growth deal bid, and can he really give us some assurance where the business case will sit in the new government?
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by commending the honourable gentleman and his colleague for Linlithgow and East Falkirk on their efforts in lobbying for the Falkirk deal. The UK Government is committed to taking forward that deal, and we are, after the very productive meeting with the leader of Falkirk Council earlier this week, we're looking forward to the Council submitting proposals by the end of August and a presentation during September.
Grady.
Speaker, I'm glad to see the Secretary of State seems to think that constitutional perfection has now been reached on these islands. I wonder if that means whether he agrees with his new party leader who told a group of activists that, quote, "We don't need an England-only Parliament, we have an England-only Parliament, it's in Westminster." If he does agree with that, doesn't that make his post, and indeed all of us representing Scotland, a little bit redundant? And if he doesn't agree, why has he been so effusive in welcoming his new leader, and is that perhaps because he himself doesn't want to be made redundant?
Mr. Speaker, if that was a question about a separate English Parliament, then I'm clear, and I think the new leader of the Conservative Party is clear, is that England does not need its own separate Parliament.
Colin Clark.
Does the Secretary of State agree that incoming Prime Minister must deliver certainty, confidence and prosperity over the whole of the UK to counter the politics of grievance and defeat?
Yes.
Masterton.
Mr. Speaker, given that 20 years on, less than half of people in Scotland think that devolution has led to better outcomes in education, health or the growth of the Scottish economy, would my right honourable friend agree with me that what Scotland needs is a government who will utilise the full effect of Holyrood's extensive powers, not deflect and delay powers as the SNP have done?
Mr. Speaker, I agree wholehearted with my honourable friend, and it's a message I get back from my own constituents. They want to see the Scottish Parliament focusing on education, on health, on transport, the issues that are important to their daily lives, not pursue an obsession with the Constitution.
Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would the Secretary of State agree with me that one of the frustrations that those of us who cherish devolution feel is the apparent reticence of the SNP to use many of the powers of the Scottish Parliament? For example, what a difference they could make to the lives of the 6,000 WASPy women in my constituency of Edinburgh West if they used the powers they had to alleviate their difficulties rather than use them as another grievance.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by asking the Honourable Lady to pass on my congratulations to her new UK leader. It's very good to see a Scottish MP in that role. I agree wholeheartedly with the sentiment of the Honourable Lady, and it's well documented that if, having aligned themselves to the WASPI cause, the SNP government really wanted to do something for WASPI women, they have the power and indeed the capacity to raise the resources to do so.
Douglas Ross. Very much, Mr. Speaker. Would the Secretary of State agree that one of the benefits of devolution is when our two governments work together, such as with the Moray growth deal? The £32.5 million from the UK government was matched by the Scottish government, and that means it can make a real difference to the whole of Moray. So devolution delivers when our governments work together.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin again by commending my honourable friend for his tireless efforts to pursue the Moray growth deal, which I think has been raised at every Scottish questions during his tenure. Yes, working together, the Scottish and UK governments, that's the best way to deliver for the people of Scotland, and let's see more of it.
Ian Murray.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the UK government's policy has been to strengthen our Union of Nations. It is at the heart of all that we do and has guided our approach to our exit from the EU.
And Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Secretary of State is to abide by his promises, it will be his last day in office, so I wish him well for his unstinting courtesy in that role. The new Prime Minister's election yesterday means that the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party are now the Scottish Conservative and Brexit Party abandoning unionism. So isn't it the case that the new Prime Minister is as big a threat to the Union, if not a bigger threat to the Union, than any nationalist? And what's the Secretary of State for Scotland going to do about it? That's right.
Mr. Speaker, that's a bit rich coming from the honourable gentleman who I have certainly always respected in my deliberations from the dispatch box. I think he would agree with commentary this week that one of the biggest threats to the continuation of the United Kingdom is the total and utter collapse of the Scottish Labour Party.
Stephen Kerr.
Mr. Speaker, more than 100 powers which are currently held in Brussels are to be transferred to Holyrood after Brexit. So does my right honourable friend agree that far from removing powers from Scotland, leaving the EU will give the Scottish Parliament more power?
It's absolutely correct what my honourable friend says, and we've been subjected again, Mr. Speaker, to many times at this session hearing about a power grab, but it has never been identified a single power that was being grabbed. Instead, what is identified is over 100 powers and responsibilities coming to the Scottish Parliament.
Wishart.
What I'm interested in is the conversations that Right Honourable Gentleman's had with his soon-to-be Prime Minister, because what he said in the past is it would be extremely difficult to stay in a cabinet under the Right Honourable Gentleman for Uxbridge. Will he ever develop anything approaching a backbone, or are Ruth's Scottish Conservatives now the exclusive property of the biggest electoral liability?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I always admire the honourable gentleman's consistency. Last week, when I appeared before the Scottish Affairs Select Committee, he said that he hoped I would not resign and that I would be in post for months and years.
David Duguid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Does my honourable friend agree that leaving the EU provides many opportunities for Scotland, the businesses, the communities and the people across Scotland, but not least of which in the fishing communities in places like my constituency in Banff and Buchan, when we leave the CFB and become an independent coastal state?
I absolutely do, and I always commend my honourable friend for the champion of the fishing industry that he is. I met with the Scottish Fishermen's Federation yesterday, and they remain excited and upbeat about the prospect of Britain leaving the EU and the hated common fisheries policy.
Mr. Speaker, politics is about principles. A few months ago, the Secretary of State told us that the threat to the integrity of the United Kingdom was the principal issue for him. But he also told us, and I quote, Mr Johnston and I don't agree on a whole range of issues, and I don't see myself able to serve in that way. So how far will the Secretary of State allow his principles to be stretched in defence of the Union just so he can keep his job?
Mr Speaker, well, I'm not going to take any lessons from the Honourable Lady on questions of leadership. Only yesterday she said we need a serious, mature politician who can be relied on to keep his promises to be our Prime Minister. I'm sure she wasn't referring to Richard Leonard or the leader of the Labour Party.
Lesley.
Well, I think we would find more maturity in both of those quarters than we might in the current incumbent to be. However, those were your opinions. You've obviously got some new ones that you've traded in. So let me just ask you this. The Secretary of State wants us to believe that this government are guardians of the Union. Yet, by already pandering to the dog-whistle politics of English nationalism, the next Prime Minister has already abandoned the tradition of the Conservative and Unionist Party. The Tory Party are now a real and present danger to the integrity of the United Kingdom. So will the Secretary of State now confirm that he will not sell out the people of Scotland and he will not be part of a no-deal cabinet?
Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady has a nerve. Her position has been to sell out to the SNP. She told her colleagues that she would gladly give up her own seat to the SNP so that there could be a Labour-SNP alliance that would inevitably lead to another independence referendum. But to give her credit, she is doing a pretty good job of crashing the Scottish Labour Party in the polls, losing 2 MEPs and finishing 5th in the European elections. Only the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party in Scotland will stand up for our United Kingdom, and I will certainly continue to do so.
Bambos, Charalambous.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 3.
Mr Speaker, the Government delivered on its commitment to provide objective analysis to Parliament on how exiting the EU may affect the economy of the UK, sectors, nations and regions in the long run.
Bambos, Charalambous.
Previous estimates have indicated that a no-deal Brexit could cost Scotland over 100,000 jobs. On that basis, will it confirm for the House that it will never serve in a government whose policy is to leave without a deal?
Mr Speaker, my position on no deal is quite clear compared to his. On the 3 occasions I had the opportunity to vote for a deal, I did so. He and most of his Labour colleagues did not.
Luke Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, deal or no deal, Scotland faces a £1 billion financial hole, 737 million of which will be bridged by funds from Westminster, funded by other parts of the United Kingdom. Can I ask my right honourable friend what analysis have done of how big this hole or how deep this hole will be if Scotland was actually separated from the rest of the United Kingdom?
Well, Mr Speaker, it's well known that in the event of Scottish independence there would be a multi-billion pound funding gap which could only be dealt with by significant tax rises or cuts in services. And those who propose independence have still not answered the question as to where that money is to be found.
Alister Carmichael.
Mr Speaker, a no-deal Brexit will be catastrophic for Scotland's hill farmers, especially those looking to export sheep meat to the European Union. That's not just my view, but the view of the National Farmers Union of Scotland and the NFU across the 4 parts of the United Kingdom. Can the Secretary of State give me and them some assurance that he will not just sit in Cabinet and watch their livelihoods destroyed?
Good question. Mr. Speaker, I've been very clear throughout my time in Cabinet about the importance of agriculture to Scotland and the needs of Scotland's agricultural industry, and I will continue to do so.
Angela Crowley. Alison Hewlett.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the causes of drug misuse are complex and need a range of policy responses. I'm aware that the Home Secretary has offered to meet with the Scottish Government Public Health Minister Joe Fitzpatrick to discuss a broad range of issues around this tragic matter of drug-related deaths in Scotland.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that the Home Secretary is finally going to meet with the Scottish Government on this. When NHS Secretary Glasgow and Clyde published their proposals for a supervised drug consumption room in 2016, drug-related deaths stood at 257. Last year, it was 394. So I asked the Secretary of State for Scotland how many people would still be alive in the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde area if the Home Office had not blocked, for ideological reasons, drug consumption rooms in Glasgow.
Mr. Speaker, as I said in my initial response, issues around drug misuse are complex and need a range of policy responses. But I welcome that the summit, which my Scottish Parliament colleague Miles Briggs MSP suggested, is going to go ahead, and I can confirm to the Honourable Lady that UK Government ministers will take part in that, and I'm sure that all the issues will be discussed at that occasion.
Ross Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Scotland's drug death rate is 3 times higher than the rest of the UK. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that in addition to UK-wide action, the Scottish Government should be using its substantial powers over healthcare, education, housing and criminal justice to tackle this?
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend. Of course, the UK Government wants to work closely with the Scottish Government. These statistics that were released last week are shocking to everyone in Scotland and indeed throughout the United Kingdom. But it shouldn't be suggested that any of the policy issues with the UK Government are the sole answer to this issue. It is complex, and the powers that the Scottish Parliament already has will go a long way to dealing with it.
Tweedy.
2 weeks ago, my constituent Chelsea Bruce died in a drugs-related incident. She was just 16 years old, Mr. Speaker. The time for hand-wringing is over. We know that drug consumption rooms, drop-in testing and even safe clinical prescribing of illicit drugs will save lives. The international body of evidence is unequivocal, but yet the Secretary of State has been sceptical and vague on this. If only he would show some leadership in urgently finding a route through the impasse between the Home Office and the Lord Advocate to help rapidly roll out these facilities in Glasgow and across Scotland. Mr. Speaker, how many more must die before the Secretary of State recognises this public health emergency and acts to save lives?
Mr. Speaker, that sort of politicking is completely unworthy of this serious debate. The Home Office, UK Government, and I respect the Scottish Government, take this issue seriously. We are going to have a summit in early course to discuss all the issues around that, and I sincerely hope, because I have had constituents die as well, that we can move forward.
What's in Whitfield? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 6.
Mr. Speaker, I have regular meetings with my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who has been unwavering in her passionate support for our union. We have regularly discussed the UK's government's continued commitment to the devolution settlement and to a strong Scotland within a strong United Kingdom.
Martin Whitfield. Mr. Speaker, if the Secretary of State is in his place later, what will he do to keep Scotland in its place in the UK?
Mr. Speaker, I will continue to do as I have done for the past 4 and a bit years, and that is to relentlessly make the positive case for the benefits of Scotland being in the United Kingdom and to the United Kingdom of having Scotland in it.
David T.C. Davis.
Mr. Speaker, Britain will be leaving the European Union on the 31st of October under our excellent new Prime Minister. And when we do so, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend, could he confirm that 100 extra powers will be devolved to the Scottish Parliament, meaning that Conservatives and Brexiteers are the true friends of devolution and a strong Scottish Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, the point that my honourable friend makes is a very pertinent one. This party, this government, has been committed to the devolution settlement and to making it work. There is one party in this Parliament that would destroy devolution, and that is the SNP.
Stuart Housey.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I will answer questions 7 and 12 together. I've had regular discussions with the Prime Minister on a range of matters related to exiting the EU. It is essential that we respect the result of the 2016 referendum vote to leave the EU.
A no-deal Brexit combined with ending free movement of people, which is the inbound Prime Minister's prospectus, would restrict Scottish business and the public sector from recruiting the staff they need. Yet the Secretary of State has welcomed the appointment of the inbound Prime Minister. Can we conclude then he's prepared to throw business and public services under a bus simply to protect his own career?
Mr. Speaker, what amounts to throwing Scotland under a bus has been the actions of the SNP throughout the Brexit debates in this Parliament, voting against 3 times an agreement which would have allowed Scotland to leave the EU on an orderly basis and largely in accordance with their own document, Scotland's place in Europe.
Douglas Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent weeks, I've read reports that house prices in London are falling and job vacancies are down. 2 classic signs of an economy going into recession. Add into this the mix of potential of a no-deal Boris Brexit boom. Given these circumstances, what are the Secretary of State's plan B for the Scottish economy?
Mr. Speaker, the incoming Prime Minister has been very clear that he wants to leave the EU with a deal, and that is the best outcome for Scotland.
Tommy Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me read this for fear of misquoting the Secretary of State. He told the last Scottish Conservative Party conference, "Unfortunately, Mr Johnson seems to behave in a way that suggests he is only focused on his own self-interest and not in the interests of our country, and I find that very disappointing." Can I ask the Secretary of State, has he now overcome his disappointment, and will he continue to serve the new Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, just like him and his colleagues, everything I am ever said is on the record. But what I want to make clear is that my priority remains Scotland's place within the United Kingdom, and that, in government or out, will be my continuing priority.
Tommy Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, the House will observe that that is not actually an answer to my question. He sits beside Cabinet colleagues who have demonstrated integrity and conviction in deciding that they will resign over the question of a no-deal Brexit. If he is against a no-deal Brexit, would it not be a better look for Scotland for him to do likewise rather than wait to be sacked or abolished?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, the honourable gentleman's position isn't a deal Brexit or a no-deal Brexit. It's no Brexit. That's what he's seeking to bring about. But there is no evidence that the SNP has at any time been serious about getting a deal for Scotland. On each occasion they've had the opportunity to vote for a deal, they have voted against it.
Finally and briefly, Anna Soubry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the Secretary of State stays in his position. But apparently, in order to do so, he's going to have to sign the pledge. Because in order to serve in the next government, he's got to agree, like others, that come October the 31st, to leaving the EU, deal or no deal. So could he tell us, yes or no, will he be at the dispatch box again, or are these his last questions?
Mr. Speaker, I fear that the honourable lady's endorsement will have sealed my fate.